And you and I have talked about this many, many, many times, but it's such a fulfilling way to practice. And I think the concept of fulfillment is often missing among dentists today. Um, and I would like to see that. I'd like to see a resurgence of fulfillment because it's purpose driven. You talk about a person centered practice. But you also talk about a health-centered practice. I love both of those terms. Both of those terms deserve some amplification. And in many ways, the modern, PPO practice takes you away from both of those outcomes. The drill, fill, and bill, strap your roller skates on in the morning, shoosh up and down the halls. Not just strap on your roller skates, Paul, but you got to make sure you put the rocket boosters on the back of the roller skates so that you can shoosh up and down the halls even faster.
Right.
And that just isn't typically a model that leads to fulfillment.
No, it's and I wrote about this in the book as well. It's what I call the industrialization of dentistry. And modern day technology, that's the outcome that it tends to generate. We can do things faster and faster and more efficiently, but human beings haven't changed in terms of how they learn and how they develop their belief system and protect it or change it. That's never changed in thousands of years. That has not changed. So what technology is doing is it's allowing us to go faster and faster, but it's also causing us to ignore some of the most basic things about human nature. So
Right.
we become less effective teachers. At the same time, we're being more productive, this big paradox.
Right.
And so, we can do things faster and cheaper and more efficiently, but are we at the end of the day creating more health, or are we just putting a lot of numbers on the board?
Right. You and I share a absolute passion around the behavioral side of dentistry, and that's what we're talking about here, the behavioral side of dentistry. And like you said, it's fundamental. This is human nature. It's fundamental in connecting with people and developing rapport and relationship is part of that. And I think that's what makes dentistry such what could be a very fulfilling practice. That first part of a thriving practice is you're taking care of people you enjoy, surrounded by a team you love. I mean that environment means that you come skipping to work in the morning. You're excited to go to work in
Right.
the morning instead of feeling like it's another day at the salt mine.
Right. And that's kind of what I was referring to earlier about, younger dentists are really don't have access to experience these kinds of practices like I did, back in the 1980s, to just walk into a place that's run like that, a place that feels like that, a place that looks like that. Happy patients, happy dentists, happy team, creating outcomes that everybody feels good about. And as a natural organic machine that generates referrals, because the people are getting taken care of so well, they can't help but tell other people about it. If you've never experienced that, if your only experience is working at the clinic on the corner, you have no idea what it is to actually practice dentistry in this way, which to me, I mean, once you've experienced it, there's no going back.
Right. Right.
Treating people like essentially as procedures or potential procedures is dreadful, because dentistry is very, very hard. I mean, I don't have to tell people that. It's hard on a technical level, it's hard on an emotional level, it's hard on a financial level, and
It's hard on a physical
on a
level.
physical level. So I mean, if you're not bringing your best self to the office, and I mean that emotionally and personality wise, then it's a net drain on you. And that's why there's so many unhappy people in dentistry. That's not new either.
Yeah.
But that's why there's so many unhappy people in dentistry, is that they're really not able to bring their true self to the office every day. They're having to bottle that up or bury it, and all those frustrations and everything end up getting taken out on the dog when you get home or whatever at night, or whatever they do.
Yeah.
There just isn't a way to keep their life in balance in a healthy sort of way.
Right. You know, one of the things you do a great job in the book is identifying some of the leaders in the different aspects of the behavioral side of dentistry. And in some ways, I think of your book as, you know, a reader where it can stimulate, you know, heading off in different directions to learn so much more. But you do a really great job of identifying some of the contributions of people like Avram King, people like Will Southam, people like Dr. Omar Reed, Dr. L.D. Pankey, and others. And I can imagine that for our readers of the book, it'll take them down some fun pathways for sure.
Oh, certainly. I mean, I spent, gosh, I don't know, 2 or 3 pages on Carl Jung, and you could spend your entire life studying him alone. You could do the same thing with Carl Rogers. There are just tremendous avenues for just continued growth in these areas. I can remember the first time I picked up Carl Rogers' book called On Becoming a Person. And I couldn't put it down. Every page was like, wow, tremendous realizations, which led me to read other things. And so reading and doing your own research based on kind of where you perceive you need more growth or development is key. So yeah, it's just really the launching point. I certainly can't give you everything you need to know about Carl Jung or Carl Rogers in just a few pages.
Right.
Right.
Yeah, I'll share a fun little sidebar. Of course, as we're recording this, you and I are looking at each other on Zoom. We're recording it audibly for the podcast, but I'm holding a copy of your book, and I showed it to my 4-year-old grandson, Kanan. You know, over the holidays, shared it with him, and I opened it up. And you were very kind. You kindly included a chapter on me.
Yes.
And I opened it up to that chapter to show it to Kanan, and he really enjoyed seeing my name in print. He thought that was really. He loves books,
Right.
and he wanted me to read it to him.
Yeah. So I included the chapter on you, Gary, because I thought it's a tremendous story on growth and development. It's just being focused and how one thing led to another, but it was all centered around, you know, who you are inside and the principles that drove you from one decision to the next, which led you to meeting various people, Dr. Pankey, Omar Reed, and others. And it's just been an ascension over time of further and further development of who you are. And that's really needs to be each of our personal story as well. You know, my path isn't going to be Gary's path,
Right.
nor should yours be. The key is to understand who you are and what the real drivers are in your life, and just really put your shoulder on it and stay with it. So Gary's story is a great example of that.
You know, I think of a word to describe the book, and that is it's very inspirational. And what I mean, I don't mean that in the rah-rah cheerleading sense, but I mean it in the kind of like a compass point, you know, where it can point you in your career to really create the practice of your dreams.
All right.
You know, I'll get on my soapbox for just a minute, Paul, and it's my observation that today, you know, as we're recording this, it seems to me like dentistry is polarizing. We've got two different camps. We have one camp where, unfortunately, it's populated by some very disgruntled dentists that don't enjoy what they're doing, that truly are doing the dental version of another day at the salt mine. And that's one camp over here. And there's another camp over here, kind of diametrically opposed, that truly believe that dentistry rocks. We have the ability to change people's lives every day, and are on a journey to develop their practice in a way that represents who they are and the kind of dentistry they want to practice. And they're really enjoying their profession. And yet, you know, there's people in each camp. There's a dentist on the disgruntled side. There's a dentist on the way to fulfillment. And they're doing some of the same things, but they feel very differently about what they're doing. And the purpose of this podcast is to maybe direct more people over to that side of fulfillment and enjoyment and passion. And your book is another great way to a great guidepost in evolving that way.
Right. And I'm sure you're seeing this as well, Gary, but I mean, a lot of the younger dentists today, their primary goal is to open up multiple practices and eventually work themselves into basically an administrative job, and then to sell everything off and get out of dentistry. So their main goal is the exit, which I'm not saying you shouldn't plan for your exit,
Sure.
but I'm saying they're planning for their exit when they begin. And so when you're thinking, when that's your mindset, then your patients essentially just become a commodity in your business model. And you can't get personally involved with them. And the associates that work for you can come and go, and you don't want to get too emotionally involved with them either. So it's a very cold, hard way to make a living when you're doing that, particularly in the earlier phases. And you still have to be, you personally have to be chairside as well, while you're trying to put together this very big, complicated corporation where so much of it is unpredictable.
And there's another way,
and there's another way,
way.
there you can slow down significantly if you understand, you first have, as Dr. Pankey famously said, you have to have it on the shelf. One of your earliest responsibilities is to develop yourself clinically on a pretty high level so that you're able to actually do predictably the things that you'd like to do or want and are doing. Yeah. But the other part of it is to learn how to engage your patients on a level that they're more prone to saying yes to the more sophisticated things that you can provide. Once you get to that place, then you don't need as many patients because your production per hour goes way, way up. You don't need to work as many hours in a week. You don't need to see as many patients in a day. And the patients that you do spend time with, it's quality time. You get to know them on a significantly personal level. You become a part of their life. They see you as a significant part of their life, and you're working together on shared important goals and all of those kind of things. And it's a very different life experience, really, than the corporate dentist who's just, trying to get in and produce as much as they can in a day and get out of there because they really don't enjoy it very much.
Dr. Pankey famously said that a successful dentist needed to know four things. They needed to know themselves. They needed to know their patient. They needed to know their work, and they need to apply their knowledge. And I love those simple constructs around that. They need to know who they are. They need to know who the patient is. They've got to be skilled at their craft, and they have to apply it. It's one thing to know it, but you actually have to take it out of the box and actually apply it. And easier said than done, of course, but those guideposts are very useful.
Yeah, somebody described it not as you often see that depicted as 4 points of a cross, perhaps, with happiness in the middle, perhaps. And but a person earlier on in my career described that they're not all on the same plane. All of those areas are actually, if you can think of them as stepping stones that are at different vertical heights, and it's a process of ascension, like your life. So you never understanding yourself is a lifelong process. Developing yourself to the highest technical level is a lifelong process. Understanding your patients takes a lot of time. Sometimes it might take a couple years actually to develop a really meaningful relationship with a person. And at that point, the game changes with them. You're doing different things for different reasons. So if you think of it as a progression, of ascension, I think that's more of an accurate depiction of what Dr. Pankey meant by that.
That's a cool way to describe that, because it is multi-dimensional, if you will.
Yeah.
It's not just linear, or it's really multi-dimensional, for sure. Well, as I said, I think of the book as being very inspiring, and what I mean by that is that it provides wisdom and direction and concepts that can lead a reader to take it step by step to end up developing a very fulfilling career and a very, very fulfilling practice.
There's no question about it. As the marketplace becomes more industrialized, it becomes by default more depersonalized.
Now, call me an optimist, Paul, and if you do, I'll raise my hand and say yes, I am.
Yeah.
However, I believe that we're seeing some signs of this in other areas of healthcare. For example, if you look at the medical side, the physician medical side of healthcare, very much the same way. It's gone to managed care. Very few physicians own their practices anymore. They're owned by groups or um, uh, private equity firms or hospitals. And yet there's a segment inside medicine that is doing their variation of co-discovery, that they're practicing very different. In fact, Teresa and I, my wife and I, we have a wonderful husband and wife primary care physicians. It's a doctor team that it's all about helping their patients be well. And it's proactive, it's health centered, it's person centered. And it's such a cool experience as a patient because it's wellness where it's not the sickness model, like I'm broke, fix me.
Right.
It's I think of them as our mentors, as our teachers, beyond just being our primary care providers. And it's such a wonderful experience as a patient. Now, that's not the common experience in healthcare, but it does exist and it's thriving.
Right.
It's absolutely, of course, it's fee for service. You pay for it, out of your pocket. And as far as I'm concerned, it's the best investment that my wife and I can make, in ourselves.
Yeah, I mean, physicians are caught up in a corporatized business model as well, but a few of them have, with a tremendous amount of intention and risk in a lot of cases, broken away from that, and they're moving more towards what I would call a homeopathic practice model versus an allopathic. And they're realizing that the central realization, and I touch on this briefly in the book, is that you get to a place where you realize, and this happened to Bob Barkley as well, you get to a place where you realize that you can't impart health on other people, no matter how many procedures or time you spend trying to do that. The technology is not going to make people healthy. What makes people healthy is their own personal pursuit of health. So it flips the roles around, and all of a sudden you're in more of a facilitator role. And there's a tremendous shift going on in medicine right now. Exactly what you're describing, Gary, is that the physicians are moving away from this sickness-oriented model. Where I was just reading an article 2 days ago, I think, that they are now realizing that treatment of some of the COVID symptoms, long COVID symptoms, can actually be alleviated by treating the gut. This group of doctors, I think it was in Japan, has developed a probiotic combination in combination with a prebiotic that actually influences the gut health. They found a lot of spike protein, for instance, in the gut lining, and this combination is actually reducing symptoms. So this is the direction things are moving. This more holistic mindset, and dentistry is, believe it or not, dentistry is part of the whole body, folks. This opens a tremendous opportunity for us to engage people in helping them make better decisions relative to their masticatory system health that influence the rest of their body. And if you get curious and study in these more peripheral areas, you can roll that stuff into your practice in very effective ways, because the right patients are very, very receptive to that. I call them the seekers.
Yeah.
These are people that are reading and thinking, and they're looking for opportunities.
Well, we found this husband and wife primary care team, doctor team, because my wife wasn't happy with her primary care provider. She felt like she was being processed, felt like it was a number. And our listeners will know that my wife is a yoga instructor and she has a yoga studio. And so she checked around with her yoga community, said, we're looking for something different. Can you recommend anyone had some good experiences? And we started to hear this repeated reference to this husband and wife team. And that's how we found them, by referral. And it wasn't a single referral. It was a referral from a community of like-minded people.
Right.
And of course, we're now part of that and, sharing the word with others. Paul, I'm holding the book in my hand and I'm looking at the table of contents. You have 39 chapters. Well, wait a minute. No, there are 60 chapters altogether.
60 short chapters.
Short, they're short. They're short. It is a quick read. It is an easy,
Yeah.
enjoyable read. I'm going to put you on the spot. We didn't talk about this ahead of time, but I'll put you on the spot. Is there a favorite chapter? Do you have a favorite chapter that really resonates, that just you enjoyed writing, researching, and sharing?
Well, I mean, there's several that are kind of favorites of mine, but sharing my understanding of Carl Rogers' work has always been a passion of mine. And the section on boundaries and codependency, I think, are really fundamental. Those are concepts that I really struggled to understand for a long time. So it took me a lot of effort to write that in a way that was clear and easy to understand. So I think those probably are my favorites, because I think as I get feedback from people, a lot of people stop and say that chapter really resonated with me.
Yeah, I share your thoughts there as well. I also enjoyed some of the profiles on people in the book. People like Mary Osborne, love Mary. People like Gary DeWood, another one. Just Bill Strupp, another. And of course,
Yeah,
Dr.
I think it's really I put a lot of those in there because I think it's really important. We see the end product of a lifetime of work when we see Bill Strupp on the stage, or Gary DeWood, or Johnson Haygood, or a number of other people. But what we don't get to see is the backstory. And what I really wanted to share was, a lot of times it's not a straight line of success, or one decision and they were off and running. It was false starts, it was mistakes, it was struggles, it was resetting their objectives, and this is a common, if you sit down at the bar at the ADA convention and really hear the stories behind a very successful dentist that's maybe been doing it for 20 or 30 years, these are the kinds of things you hear. The very, very difficult times that they struggled through and how they made it. So I didn't want to paint a Pollyanna.
No, it's not sugarcoat. You didn't sugarcoat anything.
No, I wanted to speak realistically about the challenge of this pathway. I mean, it's not easy. There are plenty of times when there's self-doubt and struggle, but I've always felt, and my mother always told me this, because I'm a son of an oral surgeon, and she said, it's always going to be better for you to work for yourself. There are going to be times when that's going to be really difficult, but to have that independence is really, really important. And I would encourage you to do that. And that's my position as well to this day. If I'm unhappy about something in my practice, I just have to walk in the bathroom and look at the mirror and say, well, who is the one that whose idea was that in the first place? And it's usually me. So
imagine that,
and so I have the opportunity to fix that if I'm that unhappy about it.
Right.
When I'm working for somebody else, I don't have that option. I just have to suffer with it. So that's important.
In addition to the profiles that I mentioned, and of course I'm leaving many unmentioned, but there's many wonderful profiles. 2 chapters jump out at me. One was the origin of future focusing, the idea of being able to see what it is that you're striving toward. And then also the chapter that you posed as a question. Are you a servant leader? Are you a servant leader? Love that one. Well, Paul, as we kind of come into the finish line here, I'd like to let our listeners know where they can get the book. If you're listening to this in close to real time, it's going to come out in January of 2024. If you're listening at close to real time, I would suggest the best place to get the book would be to go to the Pankey Institute. That's www.pankey.org, Pankey.org. There's a store. And Paul, you've been kind enough to donate a bunch of the books to the Pankey Institute. They are selling the books, and all the proceeds will go to support the Institute. So thank you for that, Paul, and thank you for the support of the Pankey Institute. If you're listening to it later, barnesandnoble.com. BARNESANDNOBLE.com. Just type in CoDiscovery, Dr. Paul Henny, and you'll find the book at Barnes and Noble. And then also would like to direct people to your website, Paul. Of course, you're doing workshops and lots of things be happening in the future at your site. And that's CoDiscovery.com. Did I get the URLs correct?
That's correct. And I have books here as well. If you would like to have a autographed copy, you can email me and you can purchase one that way as well.
I have a very special one that was autographed by you on my bookshelf. Absolutely. And that they can do that through CoDiscovery.com.
Yes.
Yeah.
Yes.
Well, Paul, I just want to conclude by thanking you. Thank you for your friendship. It's cherished. Thank you for your influence on my life. And thank you for your commitment to our amazing profession. It's profound, for sure.
Well, I always appreciate your support, and I enjoy talking with you every time we reconnect, Gary, and I look forward to seeing you again soon.
Well, I'll remind our listeners the fourth point that Dr. Pankey mentioned, if of successful dentists, and that's they apply their knowledge. So if you found this interview interesting, the next thing to do is to read the book. The book is amazing. We'll also want to thank all of our listeners. We appreciate each and every one of you here at the Thriving Dentist Show. Thank you for the privilege of your time, and I look forward to connecting with you on the next Thriving Dentist Show.